MGM. How are you all doing? Oh, we got some feedback. I go a little loud. Welcome to our fantastic panel here. We have some amazing people here. I'll introduce myself first. Griff Green. I've been trying to build URL economies with IRL ecosystems. No, kind of. Yeah, basically. For my entire time here in crypto since 2015-ish. And founded Giveth, DAppNode, Common Stack, and am working on really making a prototype for launching economies like this that I'm calling the Quadratic Accelerator, which is coming out soon. But I'm moderating the panel, and I'll be mostly passing it to these guys, these amazing panelists, and which I'll let them introduce themselves.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say how much I love the title of our panel today, because URL economies are not often enough connected to the IRL application, so what a fun thing to get to talk about. My name is Anna Stone. I am one of the co-founders and executive directors of GoodDollar. We are a crypto universal basic income protocol that's been operating since 2020. We've onboarded nearly 1 million people around the world in over 181 countries into Web3 with tokens that actually use these crypto tokens to do things in real life, like start cell phone businesses or donations or build IRL peer-to-peer economies around them. So a very apt topic for us to discuss today.
Hey everyone, I'm Phil. Also a great panel topic and very excited to dive in. I've been in the crypto space for a little over 12 years thinking about and building online communities and very much thinking about how to build that transition from the real world to the online world, TradFi to DeFi. Most recently, I was the co-founder of a company called Flow Carbon that was thinking about how to build and take an existing market off-chain and actually bring it on-chain, so almost the opposite of what we're talking about. And now I'm the founder of a new protocol that's building a DeFi primitive around credit default swaps.
And hi everyone, I'm Luca. I am one of the co-founders and the president of the M0 Foundation. M0 is a project that intends to revolutionize stablecoin design in crypto. I've been in crypto space and stablecoin space for quite a while as a researcher and collaborator in some of the largest projects in DeFi, including MakerDAO and a few others. I am like a pragmatist, but also an innovator. So like the M0 project wants to really scale this digitally native dollar in like hundreds of billions of size, but doesn't want to do it by just relying on the banking system, because that's not what crypto is for. So we are really ambitious in recreating a monetary policy that is digitally native and is closer to the needs of the projects that exist in this space. So looking forward for the panel.
Nice. Yeah, and let's just dive right into it. I feel like one of the biggest innovations in crypto is the fact that you used to have an army to create an economy. Now you just need to know a couple of nerds, and you can whip an economy up over almost any value that you want to create. Now the challenge is creating demand, but there's also a huge challenge in going to meet space. And that's, I think, the big challenge that we want to focus on today. How do we, it's really easy to run nodes and have proof of scarcity digitally, as well as having a, kind of a competition like proof of work or proof of stake in a digital space. But a lot of the IRL economies, you want to create value IRL. What are the biggest challenges that you see in creating digital economies that are around IRL value creation?
I can start on this, and then I'll let the others, but because it's very close to my heart. I think that, to me, like the crypto ethos actually has two tiers, let's say. The first one is just recreating a social construct around different primitives, which is phenomenally beautiful, is very ambitious, probably not really realistic in the short term, but it's directional. I think it's something that is happening. The second one is actually recreating the way we interact with less intermediaries, less profit centers, and just reshaking a bit the system a little bit. And for example, I talk about stablecoins. Stablecoins is a boring product, which is a good thing because it means it kind of works. But it's also the largest product by product market fit, right? Now, there are two ways of looking at stablecoins. Like, there are the old folks that are trying to say, okay, stablecoins is like you do payments on chain. So the rest is the same. Like you have the central bank, you have the commercial banks, you have the bankers and the regulators and blah, blah, blah. Then if you want to do payments for your games, you do it on chain with the stable coins and just don't bother us. This is not crypto. Like the way we are looking at stable coins, for example, is like, it's the way you create money. You don't need the banks. Even if you want to scale them, you can do it better. You don't need the regulators in the same way. You don't need the same intermediaries. No, you don't need like investment banks that makes hundreds of billions of dollars just because they actually are gatekeepers. So you can reshape the whole stack and reshape it in a different way. And that is difficult because even if there is an obvious product market fit, then there are the centers of interest are saying, no, you cannot do it because of that. You cannot do it because of that. But that is not true. So I think that I really hope that in this space we keep trying building by like challenging profit centers and middlemen and established businesses, recreating stacks the way we do things, and at the same time evolving and increasing transparency in how we actually organize ourselves as society. I think it's a process, right? We're not going to go in from like powerful states with armies to communities in anarchy. It's probably like somewhere in the middle. But it's a process we never have to forget for quick monetization, because I mean this sector has also quick monetization that we need to avoid. But I think there is absolutely the possibility to do that.
I think it breaks down into two different categories, right? There are the financial innovations that were taking place and what community means around that and how you bridge the real world and the online world, right? So for example, M0, if I take M, when can I spend M at a store, right? That sort of to me is when it's entered the real world. Right now it's a digital asset and almost all stable coins, with very few exceptions, are really hard to spend in the real world. You can spend them very easily online and there's a lot that takes place online. And then privacy comes into that and that's really interesting. But now the other category is community that's not necessarily financial based, where you have incentives and you have things that are meaningful and important to people that you want to build and explore and expose to them that has nothing to do with finance, right? Things like identity, things like reputation. Having that where it's almost the opposite, where in a financial sense, I actually want privacy, complete privacy. I want to be able to do transactions. I want to be able to have trustlessness and permissionlessness. But on the other side, when I want reputation and I want someone to know, hey, I am trustworthy, right? It's a very different state of affairs, and it's an equally important use case that is really difficult and I don't think gets enough traction these days.
Yeah, I mean, riffing off of what Luca said, which was a very macro view of it, when we're talking about communities and what's happening in a micro sense, I think it's really important to remember like how experimental all of this really is. And for many, many people, blockchain is taking everything that you don't understand about technology and combining it with everything you don't understand about money and finance, right? And so when you're talking about communities where you don't have a very high degree of, let's say, just you don't have money, if you will, which is the populations that we work with, it requires a lot of onboarding, a lot of education, and a lot of community trust in order for the monetary experiment to even take off the ground, right? So I think whether you're talking about the macro process where Luca's dealing in terms of this is a progression, this is something that's gonna happen over time, there's also the learning and understanding of individuals and people in terms of not just the exercise of using the blockchain, but also we haven't innovated that much around money in hundreds of years. And so the experiments, you're waiting for people to get it in terms of advancing the experiment, but it's not like we have hundreds or millions of playbooks around how to build value in community using tokenization yet. And I think that this is one of the big challenges that all of us are working on, right, is trying to create the first, second, third generation projects that kind of create that infrastructure of learning, knowing that it's ultimately going to be a very long evolution until we get to the real winning currency models or community models or reputation models. And that experimentation curve is just long and hard.
I mean, yeah, money is the biggest network state in the universe, at least that we know of. Maybe the mycelial network is bigger, but and so it's the low-hanging fruit that we're all going, or a lot of us are going after and building on, because it just makes sense. It's the thing that we can disrupt and make sense around immediately. But when you start thinking about how do you actually translate community and actually building out how do you find people with shared interests? How do you find and identify the people who actually are thought leaders and have reputation around things, you create an entirely different system that has money as a core part of it, because that's obviously, we're never going to escape that. But how do you actually let it become so localized that you can create functionally your own tribe, right? And so that you have your own community that does its own thing, that has its own systems and ways of doing things, that interacts with the broader monetary system at writ large, but can create its own community currency, for example, or can create its own reputation system, or can innovate and interact with other communities in any way that it wants.
I think one of the big challenges is when you inject money into a community, there's like, money has a lot of use cases, right? The three most common ones, and then Andreas Antonopoulos throws in system of control, and then I like to throw in destroyer of relationships. I feel like if you want to destroy a relationship, the best tool to use is money. And when you're bringing in money into communities, it feels especially difficult, especially if you're trying to coordinate IRL value production that was already kind of there. It seems like injecting money sometimes will make things worse.
Yeah, but I think there's also the opportunity to take things that don't exist, right? And to take activities and try and break them away in a form of tokenization where you can give people tokens that, sure, they could have a monetary value and you could trade them for, money or things that are used as money, but also have more intrinsic value away from the money. So the more you have of it, it actually indicates something about you, almost in like a leaderboard fashion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and then, this is the last promise macro philosophical point I make. But what you I mean, I'm a bit more neutral, but I agree what you said, that to me, one of the main functions, because money doesn't exist. Like, this is one of the funny things that most people, like when you go to, I spent like 20 years of my career pre and post crypto revolution thinking about monetary design and writing about monetary design. When you go to a bank and you see your bank account, you think that your money there actually is there, and the money that you lend, like that you receive when you buy a house through a mortgage, is someone else's money that the bank has. Is not true. That's like a number, a balance that an institution has created out of thin air, absolutely, with a system of balance you can kind of trust that works, but it's not true. So money is a very abstract concept, and I think the main functionality of it is the most powerful resource allocator in the world. It's so powerful that you just like, it's something that doesn't exist, but the fact that you see a number in a bank account, maybe you are so rich that you're never gonna spend it, but you see a number in a bank account and it incentivizes you to do one thing instead of another. Now, you can use a very powerful incentive system in a very destructive way or in a very constructive way. And I'm European. Europe historically, Europe I grew up has always been way more socialist. Like the term socialism, you go to the US, it seems like something crazy, but I think most of Western Europe is actually socialist. And I think the US instead has been supercharging the system with a hyper-capitalist system that incentivizes through money that is very powerful, grows very fast, is not very resilient. And I think crypto has the opportunity to be way more transparent in how you direct incentives, but it's be realistic. Like this hasn't been the case at the beginning. Like now, crypto has supercharging the monetization of incentives, which is even worse. Now, but it's like we shouldn't point the finger towards the tool, rather towards the users, and try to use the tool in a better way. I think this tool, from a money incentivization perspective, is just super flexible, super transparent, super composable, which is a great tool. Now we need to use it well. If we don't use it well, it's our fault. It's not the tool's fault.
Yeah, I feel like it's all about stories, right? Money is a story, and how do we build that narrative around the money and how it actually works? Like, does Bitcoin really have value? Well, the story of Bitcoin sure does,
I think one of the elements, just playing off of what you said about the destroyer of relationships, it's not money itself, it's our obsession with having to use the money to create profit, right? So that's actually one of the, let's say, toxic elements when you inject money into a community, is that if the expectation is profit, then the motivation is the money itself, right, and returning the money itself. And I think one of the interesting things that we're trying to innovate on is actually, okay, how can we go back to this first principles thinking of money as a tool that actually can have different features, different functions, maybe isn't obsessed with interest, if you will, and can potentially unlock value in activities and areas that are currently in our modern economy deemed unprofitable and undesirable. And I think, you know, when you look at some of the community currency experiments that have happened in crypto and also elsewhere, that's part of what they're trying to drive at, right? Is actually, rather than injecting money into a community and the expectation being that someone's gonna be able to take that dollar and turn it into $1.20 or $1.50 and return it, that you're actually trying to create a different flow that incentivizes different behaviors, that maybe, you know, is optimizing for the money switching hands 10x, right? And not, and playing with that element a bit more.
One of the things that I get really excited about building economies around are things that are traditionally less transactional. So like public goods, you know, things where your only option is to get donations, basically, or that's the default expectation. But yet nonprofits still create value. Do you guys have any ideas about building economies? I mean, for me, it seems like the bar is so low to build economies around nonprofits. They don't even have to be profitable, because nonprofits are 100% loss when you donate to them, basically. Max, you get a tax deduction. Do you guys have, okay, yeah, you just want to jump in?
Well, I think it's really interesting because we're basically talking about public goods, right? And money is a public good, right? Money, the problem with money, which we sort of started alluding to, is that when you inject profit into the creation of money, right, you end up with all sorts of ills, right? And there obviously need to be derivatives and ways to hedge risk and create risk and push risk around in the system, but all of that is derived from the fact that we've injected this profit center into money. And like the creation of money, and I think I'm just teeing this up for you to talk about your governance model, but how do you create value, right, where you're actually incentivized to build something, but at the same time looking at it and saying there's a system here that's meant to be a public good, it's meant to be governed as a public good, and if it becomes profit driven and you start having actors who are just trying to extract from the system, that it ends up being, you know, more of the same.
Yeah. Okay, I really didn't want to talk macro more, but yeah, I think, like, to your point about public good, I think that this is a great opportunity to recompose the stack, but unfortunately, public good in isolation like doesn't work, not even today, right? If you look at like the largest endowments in the world, like university endowments, they are also the largest private equity investors in the world. Like the Yale endowment is, I don't know, it's like $80 billion, $100 million. It's super for profits. They invest in like hedge funds and whatever, and then they take the profits and they reinvest the profits in education. So it's something, everything is connected. So it's also how you use the proceeds of certain things. But it's funny that how like the crypto is speed walking the ideas that we have around incentive systems. But I think profit is the other side of risk. A risk is a good thing, right? Because like you want to buy a house, you don't have the money. So either you wait for saving the money and just buy the house transactionally, or you have someone that trusts your ability to create wealth with work, gives you money today so you can buy your house and you can repay it in 30 years. And it's moving. Like, I have a lot of money now, like you don't have the money, you want the house, I'll give you the house, you will pay me for the time, which is actually a great thing. And if you break it, you actually cannot finance things that do not exist. So like, you know, Bitcoin was born and say Bitcoin is the best form of money. Bitcoin is the worst form of money because it's deflationary. There is no incentive to exchange hand. You just buy it and you store it. And actually, the more you just delete the supply, the more is your value, the better it is for you. So it's a great storage, but it's terrible for money. And then we went back and we said, okay, but so money needs to be inflationary, it grows. So it means that there are profits because there are activities, you're actually projecting in time what can happen. And then you push it because crypto is fun, because crypto gets always more aggressive. And then now you have forms of money that gives you 50% return. It means they are super speculative. They're not stable. They're not money. And it's somewhere in the middle. So I think that it's always, I think like a monetary base that grows, it means that an economy is growing, it means that there is more activity, but needs to grow in an orderly fashion. And if it's disordered, it's destructive. So it's always the rate of change sometimes is more interesting than the base. But again, going to the point, like, there are ways you can tool it. Like the tax system is the best risk allocator we have, a resource allocator we have had so far. But you could do it within a system where you disincentivize people to to hoard money, and actually you incentivize, you punish them if they don't spend it. So there are many ways, and the beauty of crypto, you can design them. Like there were some experiments in crypto like a couple of years ago on typical like common tragedies like environment. Environment is the best example. Is a tragedy of commons. So we are killing ourselves, but no one wants to do the first move because you do it on your own. There is no impact. You're just bearing the cost for everyone else. It's a typical coordination. You can definitely do it with money or crypto. We just did it very badly for profits, but there are many ways. I mean, counter assist. You've been working on this like in your previous company, and I think this is another great example of coordination. You can do coordination in communities. Small communities easier to coordinate. We should start there experimenting, and then you get larger.
No, I think that's exactly right. And the problem on the climate side is that once you build incentive mechanisms and coordination tools, if everyone doesn't opt into it, it becomes a lopsided system. And so the biggest challenge that we have is that until there is actually true global coordination on this, it doesn't matter how many markets you create in localized areas, right? So Europe has actually a relatively effective cap and trade system on carbon emissions, but the rest of the world doesn't. And so the rest of the world is not incentivized to decrease emissions because it's just like, oh great, Europe's going to do it for us, right? Europe is going to end up paying for it. The United States can't get its act together to do anything in the side of regulation, and in fact is moving backwards in a lot of ways. And then on the other side of the spectrum, which is sort of fascinating to think about, is China, which as a command economy, right, is actually able to say, no, we're just going to, all cars are going to be electric soon, right? We're just going to build them, we're going to do it, we're going to put a ton of capital resources towards it, and they're doing it not because they actually care about the environment, right? They're doing it because they think it's a better way for them to be competitive in the long run. And so that incentive system is actually driving because they're responding to these other economies that are saying, oh yeah, we're going to build electric cars. It's moving in that direction, right? Same thing with nuclear power, right? It's just they're looking at it as the economic incentive for them to build it is there. It's not, they don't care about safety, they don't care about regulation, it's just let's do this because the economic incentive is there. But until we get the entire globe on the same set of incentives and aligned on that, the climate is just going to continue to be a tragedy of the commons.
But this economic incentive is, I think, where we have the biggest opportunity, because in the end, the homelessness issues in the States, in big cities in the States, is very horrible. It reduces land value, it reduces like people's experience walking around, and yet there's no, economic force to support it. But there could be, because there is value. And same with keeping a river clean or all these things. There is value there. I feel like with URL economies, as saying, just crypto. With crypto, couldn't we create an economic incentive around that value creation?
Yes, but you have to get people to buy into it, right? And so the way that we've bootstrapped incentive models in crypto to date is like, tokens, right? We hand out tokens and we say, hey, this token is, you should want this token because it's tradable for value or will have value in the future. The problem is that comes back to this same system of how do you balance that with the fact that you're not, in the long run, is it just people doing it for an economic incentive, and when the economic incentive is gone or is not sustainable in the long run, the whole thing falls apart, right? And in crypto, we've seen that countless times, right? When the incentive ends, the protocol goes away. And so designing systems that solve that is incredibly difficult. And that's one of the things that the monetary system has done in the long run because it's backed up by warships. And so it's like, no, the music is not going to stop. But when the music stops, it's painful.
Well, I mean, what about meme coins? They don't have any crazy mechanism. I mean, what about the meme of just helping the environment or taking care of some sort of social cause?
I think, Anna, you can speak to this more than anybody else because how do you get people to just say, yes, I care about this and I want this and it doesn't have to have value? The meme coin works because the belief is that it's going to have value. The belief is that this is going to continue to go up and therefore I will make money, right? They're not in it because, oh my God, I really love dogs, right? That's not the reason that these people are buying this.
And I think also with the meme coins, we've seen this cycle that inherently the meme coins themselves are a zero-sum game, right? And anyone who knows anything is aware of that, right? That if there is no value, if it's only playing the network, one person in the network versus the other person in the network, the last person to buy, the last person to sell, you end up in one of the most extractive examples, right? Where really you're just trying to be the last person not holding the bag. And I think that, meme coins are fascinating, right? Because they actually show the power of digital communities to come together to create value out of nothing. if you will, but they also show the inverse of that, which is that if there's no actual, genuine, authentic, shared sense of purpose, then most likely, again, not in every example, but in 98, 99% of the examples, you end up with that crash, right? Where it's not actually based off of anything fundamental. It's not actually based off of a true value of a tree being worth more in the ground than it is extracted out of the earth. And I think that that is one of the areas where crypto's done a really bad job, right? Because when it's just a URL economy, when there's very little connection to actually what's happening in the real world or in real people's lives, then you can all too easily end up in a situation where it is just completely detached from anything that delivers value to us as individuals, as people, as families, as citizens, right? And it is just another video game, a financial video game, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, like that is where, if you can actually interact with the real world and the online world together, it's much harder to walk away from. Think about how easy it is for you to exit a community online and say, okay, I'm selling this meme coin, I'm done, I don't care anymore, right? It's much harder for you to exit a physical community or exit a friend group, right? There is that social layer that comes into it, and so when you combine the two, you have a much more powerful network.
Yeah, but I still think I'm an optimist. I think that if you look back 50 years ago, the world was way worse. Like 120 years ago, 20 years ago, Queen Victoria wouldn't have had access to the level of healthcare of probably the poorest person in Europe. So we're definitely doing pretty good, I think, on average. I think that this new technology that we are here in this city for is very powerful. I think there is a positive and negative aspect, like the fact that it puts like in your face that it monetizes everything. It's scary, but it's also good because you cannot hide. Like if you look at URL Economies, we drank the Kool-Aid for 20 years that Web2 startups were just doing something super cool, friendly, everything is free, and they were just smarter. They were harvesting our data and selling us to the best bidder, and they became 10 times larger and then the largest Wall Street bank. So now we woke up and we don't like it. So I think that, and at least in crypto, it's really in the face that it monetizes everything, and you need to pay attention. But it's a very powerful tool, and I think it's something I still believe that can be used in a more granular, more transparent way to keep improving incentives, because we have been improving incentives over the last 100 years. There were terrible things you could do 100 years ago that you had no consequence for, right? And I think now also in environment, etc. So now it's definitely getting better. And this is a way more granular and composable technology to do stuff and experiment at the micro level. I mean, you could actually spin out your own monetary policy for a community in crypto. I mean, you couldn't do it. And you could even connect it to the global banking system through Bitcoin. I mean, you couldn't do it like 10 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, this is incredible tech. And one of the things that I get excited about is like, could we, because you said it very clearly, like things have gotten better. I don't think that there's any denying that. And actually, governments are mostly responsible for that. Of course, there's been a lot of innovation through corporate means that have provided a lot of value to society. But governments have done a relatively good job, but yet we always talk shit, right? We all hate governments. Can we, and I don't think anyone thinks that governments are the pinnacle of human coordination, right? Like, do you guys think that we can actually build something better than governments with this tech?
I think different. Just different. Like, you know, like if you, I think we keep growing, right? We had city-states. I mean, I'm originally from central Italy. I think Tuscany had, I don't know, like 50 states within the region. I mean, there was no communication. Like, you know, sometimes some people never traveled in their lives from Siena to Florence. They were like alien countries. And then better communication, better tools. Then you go to nation states, continental blocks. Now, like, we have, like, some fortunate people live in this, like, meta layer where we speak the same language, we actually use the same type of currency, we go to this, we're exposed to the same level of information, so we can coordinate ourselves better, and governments get larger. And, like, so I think that this is a process. And the funny thing is that I also think that this improves human awareness. I think because of compassion, it's also a function of what you think is part of your environment. I think that, like, 100 years ago, if you were doing something terrible to another race, you didn't care. It's not you. Today you care, but if we drop a nuclear bomb in a different planet and we kill, I don't know how many microorganisms, we don't care. They're not us, right? So if you expand like your sphere of influence, you also become way more compassionate about what you care. You don't dump like the nuclear rubbish in another continent if you think this is still your home. So I think that's definitely. So I also think that political projects will need to change and will need to become way more coordinated, because now we are expanding our sphere of influence and understanding.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you listen to sort of what Balaji was talking about before, and this is sort of well documented throughout history, where we swing back and forth from centralization to decentralization, and it seems like we're on a swing towards decentralization again, right? Certainly we all here believe that and are working towards that as a big goal, but the technology should enable that, and it should enable more local communities to have currencies, incentive models, and the transparency around that and how they all interact with each other essentially seamlessly on chain, right? In similar ways that you can use a credit card today to swipe in pretty much any country in the world, and it just works, right? And you're spending in your dollars, but you're buying in their currency. It's going to work even more effectively on chain with way more currencies and way more tokens and different incentive systems. But it's the transparency around those that's actually really important. And that's what the technology really will allow, is for you to experiment and to create these incentive systems that everyone understands what they are. And so you can theoretically game out what's going to happen based off of different actors because you understand the incentives.
And I agree with you that we give governments too much crap too often, if you will, because they are important and play an important role in our society. But I think on the flip side of that, when we're looking at decentralized technologies, it's a freedom enabler, right? And for so many people that actually don't have the ability to create a lot of freedom of their own opportunities in their lives, this is where decentralized technology, as it's related to money, is a really interesting, specific, particular technology, right? Because the way that the blockchain works, or the innovation, the fact that you actually can create some sort of currency that creates enough trust amongst the context of the people that are holding it, is a new innovation that creates freedom for many individuals that previously didn't have that ability to collaborate with one another, right? And I think, just to bring it back to some of the work we've done with the universal basic income currency, that's actually quite interesting, right? Because even though you're giving out cheap money, for lack of a better word, small amounts of money, when people are able to, in lieu of access to other assets, in lieu of access to other tooling, then people actually have the opportunity to create their own opportunities or build micro businesses on top of that, right? And so money is a particular type of technology, in that it can only exist in one place at one time. And when you're actually breaking that monopoly on money, which is a narrative we don't use very much in crypto anymore, but it is a true narrative, that is a big unlock, and there is, that is a freedom enabler, and just different from what governments can offer, and certainly global governments in unison.
So I just want to clear something up. I don't speak well of governments. I want to respect that governments do a lot of good things, but I think governments are also, directly responsible for most of the horrible things that happen in this world. So, it's like it's a double-edged sword there. But also something that you brought up is UBI as a mechanism for, launching IRL economies, or launching URL economies to have IRL impact. I'm curious what other mechanisms you guys like, what other mechanisms are out there that if people are looking to build a URL economy around an IRL ecosystem, like what can they use? What are tools that are valuable?
I mean, I think that the whole technology, in the sense that it breaks barriers and kills the middleman. So even at the smallest level, most microscopic level, you can connect and do a lot of stuff. So it even unlocks certain things that work well but are not accessible for so many people in this planet. I spend a lot of time in Latin America. Latin America has not so great monetary political systems, but people are trapped in it. It means they don't have access to capital, they don't have access to flows, they cannot move their money around, it means they cannot move themselves around. And I think you can do the same stuff now. So I think there are a lot of like businesses and ideas that will, I think many ideas will be successful by replicating the things that we have access to for people who don't have access to them now. And you can just do it with 3 people and global access directly. You don't need an army of lobbyists and lawyers and 1,000 people company. Like even going to the most stupid stable coin, like even we don't think about how they are designed, whatever, but today you can create like a financial use case for people to keep their money in the currency they want, not being exposed to the political insanity of some countries and inflation, simply creating a front end where they can just receive their salary however they want, and nobody can stop them. And it's incredible. I mean, I still think the Bitcoin phenomenon is probably the most incredible phenomenon of the last at least 50 years. Nobody knows who created it. It was completely bottom up. Everybody hated it. Nobody controls it, but still exists. And now it's so dominant that just like the common, because then the word is pragmatic. Even politicians, right? Politicians are terrible, but they move with consensus by definition. So like you have the most aggressive politicians. If they to be re-elected, they need to be advocates of peace. They will just swap their clothes and just be, yeah, like peace, vote me. So I think that's good. But like access for me is not so exciting to think, yeah, you can do the same stuff. But the reality is like 80% of the world doesn't have access to the things we do have access to. So I think like breaking the barriers is going to be a massive factor, like, change enabler.
Yeah, I agree. Bitcoin is sort of the thing that birthed all of this and created the ability for us to say, here's an incentive model, and if we just let that incentive model run on its own, it will create a network state, right? And that network state will have more and more value over time because of the way the incentive model is designed. And I think that's the design space that we're all sort of playing in, and seeing how we can apply that outside of monetary policy, right? And outside of, assets that have value, but more about assets and things that are driving community and driving real world interactions is a really fascinating thing. And so I think there's a lot of design space to play in where you're looking at, here's the incentive model, here's how I'm going to build it, here's how I'm going to let it run to incentivize in the long run something that I want. Now, these are all experiments, and so most of them are not going to work. The fact that Bitcoin worked came after lots of other experiments in a similar vein all failed.
And I think also where we started is that Bitcoin's actually not a great source of money, right? Because of its deflationary quality and because the incentive is to hoard it. And you asked about other tools that we're interested in. And I think, two areas really jump out to me. Everything having to do with mutual credit and how you actually lower the barriers to entry for experimentation for mutual credit, right? UBI is an extension of that. It's actually designed around enabling people who otherwise don't have access to assets, don't have access to credit, to create credit amongst themselves. And so I think that's one area. I think another area that's really an interesting tool space is actually the incentivizing different types of financial behaviors outside of profit, right? And I think, Griff, what you've done with Giveth is a great example of that, right? In terms of trying to incentivize people donating, trying to really drive that loop where if you try to be a good person, you're being recognized and rewarded for being a good person, both reputationally but also financially, right? And I think these are the tooling areas where if we're really trying to create newness, if you will, or money that functions differently than what we've seen before, either fiat or Bitcoin, right? These are the tooling areas that need to be explored. And one of the areas where we've really fallen down, I think, as an industry, or maybe it's just not happening yet, is that as builders, we haven't built that many great tools that actually lower the barriers to experimentation, right? And I think that these are actually the next generation of products that are taking kind of some of the lessons learned from this generation and really focusing on what is the platform, what is the user experience that actually enables a group of 200 farmers in Chile to actually begin to create credit and collaborate, and how do we do it in a way that's easy and cheap and minimizes, risk and destruction, if you will, And knowing that there's going to be lots of fires and failures along the way, but still trying to, as builders, create better software, ultimately.
I want to double tap on mutual credit. I think that's like a really cool mechanism, and I don't know if you want to explain it deeper, because I bet a lot of people here are not familiar with. Is everyone who here knows much about mutual credit? Okay, you want me to do it? I mean, I can do it. I can absolutely do it. I love mutual credit. I'm a huge fan. It's basically money backed by trust, right? So think of the classic bar tab. You go to a bar a lot, you know, and you're like, I don't have any money. Like, I know you're good for it, you know, I'll give you this one for free. Put it on your tab, right? That's effectively mutual credit, but think of it like networkized, right? If that's not a word, clearly, but that kind of concept. This was actually what Ripple was originally built off of. And Trust Lines was kind of a more recent implementation. But imagine if you could have a tab with someone, and you say, hey, I trust you up to $100, right? And then they trust someone else up to $200, and they trust someone else up to $300, and someone else trusts that person for $50. You could actually have a tab that goes across all the way through to this other person that you have no idea. We're talking 6 degrees of separation, and you know almost everyone in the world, right? So if we had, you could actually build a monetary system with mutual credit without any collateral, just trust. All you need to know is that when you give someone a $100 credit, you'd be like, hey, if you owe me something in this system, you would give me like $100, right? And we'd clear it out. And as long as that's true with everyone that you add to, you could just create money backed by trust, no collateral. And I think this is totally unexplored in this system. Just to like throw out a couple other mechanisms that I think are really useful. Lotteries, like there's a crew called Lotto PGF going hard on this. Pool Together is kind of a lottery. The Great Wall of China was built with a lottery. Public schools in the States are funded by lotteries. There's total lack of lotteries in this space. I think bonding curves are also a really underexplored mechanism. How many people have NFTs or tokens in their wallet worth zero? Right? A token on a bonding curve will never be worth zero because it can be minted and destroyed backed by collateral. It's like the anti-mutual credit almost. But it's also a very powerful tool. And I think there's other tooling out there that I don't know if you guys have other ideas that.
Well, I think mutual credit is really interesting because it works in the real world because reputation is sort of this like underpinning of it, right? I know you and I'm willing to trust you up to a size. You know somebody else and somebody else. When you take this into the pseudo-anonymous world that we live in crypto, it's really hard to be like, well, do I trust this person? Do I actually know who this person is? And so one of the things that I think is sorely missing in crypto is this ability to actually onboard reputation and to have something where there's an entire system built around and onboard enough people into a reputation system that you can build a mutual credit system, that you can build a lot of these things that require reputation. And the problem is that the onboarding, the UI, the UX, and the incentivization has not been there yet. And there isn't something that is simple, fun, and effective at onboarding people in a real world environment, right? We're really good at onboarding people in a virtual environment and saying, hey, airdrop farm this, and a ton of people go over there and they airdrop farm this, but you don't know who they are and you don't know if you can trust them at all. In fact, chances are you shouldn't trust them, right? They're gonna sell that token as soon as they can, right? But if you start onboarding people in a peer-to-peer way and doing essentially what back in the PGP days when you did key signing ceremonies, right? And you have this ability to say, oh, I met you in real life and I know who you are and I'm gonna give you some reputation and now you know somebody else and you know somebody else. That is to me the ultimate design space right now in crypto. How do we do that? And there are some ideas about how we can do that in a super fun and super simple way where you're basically going to people and inside of an activity that they're already engaged in, potentially already in a community, in a tribe, in a small group of people, their friends, that expands out and also allows for people to actually interact with other people that they perhaps didn't know before and say, oh, I met you, I actually now can trust you. And so there are ways to do this, it's just not immediately profitable, right? It's hard to think about what is the profit motive, what is at the end of the day, how am I gonna monetize building this like reputation system, building this thing where people meet in one place and then can, spiral it out to other people. It's really difficult.
Yeah, but you can do it by forcing No, implicitly, like you know, guys, were like like we always talk about AI these days. Like training AI models is very is very costly because the AI just wants to imitate a human. So you need first to show the AI what a human would do. So for 10 years we went on websites and the websites before entering would ask you, find the cars. I mean, like you find the cars because you are training the AI for free. That's the only way, the reason why you're doing it. And then you enter into the website. So you're actually working, you're training models. You're substituting yourself, pretty much. And I mean, we have done it for 10 years. Like, find a, I don't know, traffic light. Okay, now you can go in. Thanks. Next one. So after 5 years, we don't need humans to find traffic lights. The computers know. So that's can be positive and negative, but you can force certain mechanisms at the beginning, certain actions, if you think there is a long-term long-term benefit for it. And I mean, trust is it's very true. Like, it's funny, like you just unlocked like a memory, like very, very dear to me that I have. Like I remember, like I grew up in a small town in Italy, which is like a very social-based system, good and bad. And I remember, like, I was going around with my grandfather, who was like a local politician, and my grandfather was going around small town without a wallet. It's like, I don't need a wallet. I don't need a wallet. I'm just going there because I know, first of all, most of the times I'm not even gonna pay because I'm gonna just do something else, a service for this person, like, it was a doctor, stuff like that. And, or at the end, I'm gonna clear it, right, in some way. And it was working, but obviously it's very small. But now we have the tools to expand this.
I want to open it up to questions. Does anyone have anything that we touched on that you'd like us to dive deeper into, or any off-the-wall questions as well? And please raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic if you have anything. Yeah.
Brave or foolish? Thanks. Yeah, this was a great panel. So, I was an engineer long ago, and I've actually worked in policy the last 10 years. So all these questions of incentives and governance are what I've dealt with, like in a lot of large-scale systems. And that's what excited me about crypto as well. So I'm very glad that we're not now talking about GovTech. So, I think, Griff, you spoke about public goods and funding for public goods, right? And one of my concerns with the GovTech and network state movements is that public goods by nature are difficult to monetize, right? So they are non-rivalrous, non-excludable, and that's why they need to be publicly funded, because you cannot build very strong business models around it, the market failures, right? And now if we try to do it as startups, then we're adding a layer of complexity, because we have to bring in a monetization, like you're saying, like with money, we've had to. So is there any work on the conceptual theories of this stuff? Because it's very similar to the trilemma that Vitalik's talked about. Some things are theoretically impossible, right? So are we trying to take on something that maybe it's very difficult to solve for, right? Could you talk about those models?
I mean, I can take it unless you guys want it. I think that it's very hard to build business models around public goods, but where there is value, you can create economic models, is my hypothesis. And a great example of that is Bitcoin. Anyone in the world can create a Bitcoin address. It's completely non-excludable. You can't stop someone from creating a Bitcoin address. It's also mostly non-rivalrous, right? It's about as non-rivalrous as roads. It's there might be traffic and congestion, but anyone in the world can send you Bitcoin if you have an address. They created Bitcoin has been a completely an incredible public good, digital financial rails giving access to international economics to the whole world, right? That you could create value and send it anywhere in the world. That was never before possible. And I would argue it's an incredible public good. It was not funded by donations, and it wasn't funded by taxes and governments. It was funded by an economic model, because they added this little fee, right? They added this little fee, and they fund it with issuance. So they created demand for a scarce asset that they issue to the people creating value. And I think that's the public goods model that we can hopefully capitalize on to create IRL public goods focused economy. Issue a currency to reward people creating the value, create demand for that digital scarcity, the artificial scarcity that you just created out of nothing that represents the value creation. That's the hard part, is that demand for this imaginary well, it's real, kind of, scarce asset that you just created that is being given to the people creating value. That's the hard part. Any other questions or any other comments on that? Yeah.
I love that you brought up lotteries, and I was wondering if you could go deeper into that. And just because part of my college education was actually funded through a state lottery in Georgia, so I've thought about it before with crypto, but not very deep. So just wondering what has been done or what you think could be done.
Do you guys have anything?
There haven't been too many lottery experiments. Pool Together, I think, is the biggest one where they're just collecting, basically you're collecting an asset. That asset is then earning a yield, right? And then the yield is basically won by one person, and then everyone gets their money back, right, basically. But you can have any sort of lottery system that exists today. The challenge is that lotteries are regulated, right? And that governments want a monopoly on lottery because they use it to fund certain activities. And so if you were to break that monopoly, and all of a sudden you had decentralized lotteries that people could run, I don't know how governments would react to that. And I think part of the reasons we haven't seen so many experiments is because of that.
Yeah, but I think that there are experiments now because I mean, if you generalize the concept of lottery is gambling, right? And gambling is also like a massively profitable business. It's regulated. It's funny that like in the US now you have this SEC narrative. They're saying, we want to protect the consumer not to bet on crypto because it's gambling. I mean, the consumers can gamble. You go into a casino, it's fine, it's legal. It's way worse, but they need to pay the government. So what the government is saying is like, you want to gamble, you need to pay us. That is the reality. It's not that you cannot gamble. You can gamble all your wealth, it's fine, but you need to pay us. So.
Channel, every show, what they've done with gambling is
exactly
remarkable, how with the financial interest they've identified in gambling. And I remember when I was younger, gambling was considered a sin. Actually, that was like considered a weakness of character until there was an approved profit motive. And now every time you watch an NBA game, anytime you watch anything, every single channel promoting, sponsored by the gambling companies with the warning of, if you're an addict, call this number.
Yeah, and I think so like, and then I want to get to the point I want to get in a second, but I think so let's change the narrative. It's like the thing is like, it's not the government saying we want to protect the consumer. What the government is saying is that we have a monopoly on gambling. You want to gamble, you need to pay us. So that's different. Now, I think that this is something that crypto has been experimenting in transparency, which is like prediction markets. Prediction markets is a big trend today.
Poly market, it's huge.
Phenomenal, and it's actually beautiful also from a philosophical perspective in finance, but it's actually introducing uncorrelated variance inside crypto that is going to be way better to do also financial engineering, but that's a separate topic. I think that prediction market is huge, and it's gambling, right? Like, you're doing something, there is an outside outcome if you're successful, otherwise you're going to lose the money, and you can do prediction markets on anything. Prediction markets on randomness, that is pure gambling, or some event. But this is going to be, in my opinion, one of the hottest areas in crypto, and you can apply it to whatever. Now, I'm pretty sure that the government at some point is going to say, this is not a security actually, this is real gambling, so you need to pay us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a super big fan of prediction markets for years now and have lost a lot of money betting on protocols that no longer exist. But the problem is that even if once you get governments out of the way, right? One of the theses that I have on why prediction markets haven't come true is because the early use case is sports betting, right? That's the most obvious use case, and that is a market that, when not dominated by the government, is dominated by the mafia, right? And like there is just something about that I think plays into this, is that these are markets that people have and want to control the monopoly on. And if the minute we come in and say, well, there's no monopoly anymore, in fact, we're doing it with an open source protocol that anybody can fork and anybody can create something else on, it introduces like a real disruptive nature to people who have had monopolies for a very long time.
I think that's a really good point. There's a lot of outside pressure in some of these spaces. Yeah, but and to your point on other experiments in lotteries, there's a group called Lotto PGF. I think they're incorporating in Monte Carlo or what's it called? Monaco. Oh, is it Malta? Thank you so much, because I knew it was something with an M, but I couldn't remember.
This was a question I had. The prediction markets, there is one that's newer, that's getting a lot of, is it Polymarket or Polk something, but it's actually working really well. Like, and this is the 2024 version, because there was Pool Together and a few others back about 7 years ago, but it seems like they're getting more savvy in that prediction market area, that people are using them. But I do agree with what Luca said. Once they realize that it's gambling, they want a piece of the pie.
Yeah, but it's then I think that we could front run them. Imagine like we have a prediction. Imagine we have a prediction market. And we're saying we have a prediction market, and there is an algorithmic smart contract enforced mechanism that we give all the profits to charity. Now try to tell us that we're trying to do something against the public good. I think you need to confront sometimes the authority on matters of principle. What we say, we are trying to innovate money, is a very regulated space. What I always say to the people working with me on this, we always say to each other is that what is important is that we are building something we are proud to defend, not that we have to comply to whatever regulation. We need to, because the regulations change. So we need to be. So I know that if I'm I need to go and just defend with anyone, hopefully not, but with anyone what I'm doing. I'm proud to defend the reasons why I'm doing something.
And I think that's the biggest point in this whole panel is if you're doing something to make the world a better place, no one's going to come after you. I mean, this is not legal advice, but it's like if you look at the history of SEC enforcement actions, it's either against huge projects, just there's a lot of money to steal, let's go get some, right? Or real scammers. They actually do a decent job of going after bad people who are screwing people over. And I haven't seen one group go after real positive intentions group that's trying to make public goods, taking care of the homeless or something. If you want to make a lottery for that kind of thing, I think it will probably be okay. And Lotto PGF is the crew that I just want to promote a little bit because they're building the infrastructure to make it so that anyone could run their own lottery. Lotto PGF, public goods funding. Yeah, Lotto lotteries. Yeah. And I think it's really cool tooling. They have good anonymity set, and if you use it right, I also think if you're issuing a token, and if you're collecting money, and then using that money, a cut of it to do something good, and then giving it all back, that's still a little dicey, because it's the normal lottery construct. But if you are doing a lottery and 100% goes to a good cause, and you're airdropping an NFT or airdropping a token to a few of the donors, that might be a cleaner way to avoid some issues.
Well, then if you look at the NGO model, right? Let's look at just the nonprofit NGO model briefly. Then in essence what I'm hearing you say is that Lotto open source, that one that you just stated that you're plugging, but it's good, you could shill it, is then that means those public projects could actually get funded, and maybe instead of having these over crazy zealous, because I worked in NGOs, these crazy board member salaries, what are you doing for that? Have no idea what you're doing. They kicked you out of your company, and now you're here creating 100,000 for doing what? Sitting there in the executive board chair. I think this could also democratize the nonprofit if it's done purely with the constituents, right? Because if you do fundraising in the United States, someone's getting a cut that's in the board, that's what they're getting paid for. But if you democratize it and make it more even keel like this, it actually takes away anything going to them unless it's something that's fair and equitable, right? Because I think that's what you're describing. Once it gets to a point where it's too much money going their direction, no, it's okay. I'm not rejecting my voice.
Yeah.
But I think
So it's actually an interesting thing in the United States. A lot of 501c3s can actually select that they're going to engage in gambling activities, and there is an exemption that allows them specifically. There's 2 exemptions. One is for bingo, right? You're allowed to run bingo, and then you're also allowed to run certain kinds of raffles and lotteries, right? And because you're fundraising for your nonprofit, no one cares what you do. And so inside of that construct, it's really easy to do this. And then going back to sort of your point of like, where does that money go, right? There is a level of, in the United States anyway, accountability around nonprofits where you have to report on all of this information. The problem is you're reporting on it to a centralized source. You can basically dump metadata on the public and not actually give them that transparency. The on-chain opportunity is to say, well, now we actually have real transparency, right? Like you have a DAO that's behind this. The DAO is a nonprofit. It's running a lottery. Its officers and contributors or whatever are being paid this amount, but it's a 501c3, and so it can actually run these things effectively. Yeah. Yeah, it's not actually transparent. Yeah.
And I gotta throw Giveth out there because we are like a 501c3 alternative. If you're just a good person doing good work and you don't want to jump through the hoops of becoming a legal entity at all, you can actually become a verified project on Giveth and receive. People who donate to you can receive givebacks. We don't run lotteries, although we are considering turning the giveback system into a lottery, where instead of getting an automatic, the equivalent of a tax deduction, where it's like you donate to a project on Giveth, you can get up to 80% of the value you donated in Give tokens. We could also just say you don't get anything besides tickets to this raffle, and we could turn it into a lottery pretty easily. But I think we're being told this is the end of the panel, so thank you guys so much for listening.